The Planet Express crew find themselves in their strangest predicament yet. As they gather in the ship to watch a supernova, Fry puts a metal pan of popcorn into the microwave, and the microwave radiation combined with that of the supernova opens a wormhole, throwing the ship and everyone in it back in time. As they crash land back on Earth, the impact throws Bender out the window, smashing his body to pieces and scattering them across the desert. While Dr. Zoidberg stays behind to collect the pieces of Bender's body, the rest of the crew take his head and try to find out where they are and how they can get back to the 31st century. But while they are gone, Zoidberg is captured by the U.S. military, who take him to a nearby Air Force base. It is 1947, and Planet Express has crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. Further difficulties soon arise as the ship's microwave was damaged and is unusable, and they need microwave radiation to return home. But in 1947, there are no commercially available microwave ovens yet, forcing them to find another way. Meanwhile, Fry remembers that his own grandfather, Enos Fry, was stationed at this base, and he considers paying him a visit. But the professor warns him to be careful. Should anything happen to result in Enos's premature death, he'll be unable to father Yancey Fry Sr., who will be unable to father Philip Fry, and Fry will cease to exist. Panicking, Fry becomes determined to find Enos and protect him from all the dangers on a military base. But after locking him in an abandoned house, he is horrified to discover that said house is the site for an atomic weapon test, and his grandfather has just been killed in a nuclear explosion. Yet somehow, to his own confusion, Fry still exists. As he ducks into a local diner to consider this puzzle, Fry happens to meet his grandmother Mildred, working as a waitress. Mildred is inconsolable at the death of her fiancé, and Fry can't help but attempt to console her. Their conversation soon takes an odd turn as the grieving Mildred comes on to this handsome stranger who so strongly reminds her of Enos, and a one-night stand ensues. As Leela and the professor come get Fry, the professor spells out what should have already been obvious. Enos was never Fry's grandfather. He is his own grandfather! With time running out as the wormhole begins to close, the Planet Express crew take their ship and start blasting their way through the airbase, throwing the place into disarray and allowing them to rescue Dr. Zoidberg in the middle of his dissection, retrieve Bender's body, and steal the base's microwave satellite dish to reopen the path back through time. As our heroes successfully return to their own time, they celebrate that their antics in 1947 don't seem to have altered history in any noticeable way. And if the universe doesn't have a problem with Fry being his own grandfather, who are they to judge him for it? Welcome to Space Podcast 3000, where the future is in the past.
Before we even get into the episode itself, this credits gag is oddly perfect. Fun for the whole family except Grandma and Grandpa. Yeah, I don't think Fry's Grandma and Grandpa had much fun in this episode.
Well, I think his grandma had a pretty good time.
She was in mourning. I don't know if she was really thinking it through.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. I'm hard of hearing.
Well, you need an ear trumpet now, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the kind of the classic episodes of the series. Which, I mean, a lot of them could be defined as classic, but this is one that when I made a list like years ago of like the definitive must-watch Futurama episodes, this was in there.
It's really good. Like, I was laughing the whole time. It's very funny.
Yeah, it's a very good episode.
Eden, I heard you laughing your ass off at a lot of the jokes in this.
You too, Teasy.
Yes.
Anyway, so we should probably get into the episode itself. So why do the Planet Express crew keep stovetop popcorn on the ship and not microwave popcorn? Like, I've never actually seen stovetop popcorn in person.
You haven't?
No,
I don't know if it's still around. It certainly was in the 2000s, but it was much less common then. But yeah, stovetop microwave popcorn, or stovetop popcorn was the standard for a while. You would just kind of cook it over there and just make sure you keep it moving so that it pops evenly. But yeah, most people just do it in the microwave now because it has developed so much that it does work so easy. But stovetop is pretty... It feels like you have more control over it. Like you can make sure that it keeps moving and it cooks more evenly. Whereas with the microwave, it's kind of like using a coffee maker. It's just you set it and forget it. You just it takes all the work out of it for you. So it takes 30 seconds. Open the bag, put it in there, set it in there for like 2.5 minutes, and then you're done.
Yeah, as far back as I can remember, my family, we've always just used microwave popcorn. I don't know.
My dad's been making popcorn on the stovetop recently, because our air popper is kind of shitty. It kind of just doesn't pop everything, and it flies everywhere. So he's been making it on the stovetop, and he's been adding sugar, so it tastes like kettle corn.
Oh, nice.
Fun.
Well, I guess it's fine that the Planet Express crew keeps stovetop popcorn, considering that, it ends up kicking off the plot of the episode. That's
the idea. The fact that it is such an anachronism. Like, they would just have microwave. Even stovetop popcorn. They still make it now. I'm sure you can buy it, but it's just not as commonly used, mostly for the convenience factor.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
And it is very much an anachronism, which is kind of appropriate with the episode because they have to go back and find a microwave when all they have is stoves. And it's like, yeah, that's when the stovetop popcorn kind of came into vogue when they had the stovetops.
Yeah, so the fact they couldn't find a microwave oven in 47 is historically accurate, because the first microwave was publicly demonstrated that same year, and then the first consumer grade microwave oven came out in I think the mid 60s, but they didn't become affordable or widespread until the late 70s. So, no, they would not be able to find one in 1947. Although, with the trigger inciting incident here, I actually did put metal in the microwave once. It was by accident. I forgot to take the spoon out of a bowl before putting it in. And just like we see in this episode, it did ruin the microwave. It would still turn on, but after that, it would not heat anything up anymore.
Huh.
Yeah, my mom's put metal in the microwave before. There were these plates, these paper plates that had metallic film in it.
Ooh.
And that.
Ooh, yeah, that's you can put the thing with metal in the microwave is that I obviously don't do anything on my regardless, but the thing with metal in the microwave is that in many cases you can. It's a matter of distribution and overall mass compared to the non-metallic stuff in there. So just leaving a spoon in your soup that you're heating up, that's usually okay, depending on how much metal is in the spoon and what type of metal it is.
Yeah, that was what ruined mine.
So, it also matters the type of microwave. Some microwaves are more robust than others, or some have a slightly different distribution of the magnetrons in them.
It is something you definitely want to avoid, though.
Yeah, obviously you don't want to do it recreationally, or you want to kind of get out of the habit. Because I did that as well. Because sometimes you would have, it happened with hot sauce packets, because they were kept in the fridge, but we wanted them to be not cold.
Hot?
So we put it in the microwave, and it was sparking and shit. It's okay, yeah, I can take those out of there.
Oh dear.
Is it okay to microwave this? Do you remember that YouTube series?
Is it okay to microwave the... Yeah, but the thing that really screws up microwaves is that there is stuff for the metal to arc between. A tinfoil ball is really bad. Steel wool is really bad.
Noted. Pro tip, don't put steel wool in your microwave, I guess.
Yeah, you use the Brillo pads in the sink. So,
one thing that's actually kind of interesting about this episode is it actually breaks the cardinal rule that Matt Groening and David Cohen set out when they first made Futurama.
Oh?
So when they first started making the show, they decided a hard rule would be no time travel. They didn't want...
that was one of the big things with the thing, because, obviously, if you can just time travel, you can solve all your problems that way.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't want to end up in that situation.
So, which is why we got such the kind of outlandish situation of running a microwave at the same time as watching a supernova, because it is such an unusual event, or it is such a thing that wouldn't happen ordinarily. And they did do a decent job of saying, this is not something that should normally happen.
Yeah, it's non-replicable. Although what's interesting is this episode was originally conceived for the Anthology of Interest series, But yeah, as they developed it, they started having so much material that they decided it really needed its own episode.
Which is interesting because this was intended as a what-if scenario, but it ended up becoming an important part of the series canon.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
goes to show the strength of having creative people who can figure these things out and tie it all together, like we were talking about just a few episodes ago. And what's one thing that's kind of neat is, according to the commentary on the DVD, the episode's director wanted to mirror the concept of time travel within the boarding of the episode itself, so that like actions relating to the past would take place primarily toward the left side of the screen, while the future is more toward the right. And they also extended this to like setbacks and progress for the episode's plot, respectively. So stuff that drives the plot forward is going to be on the right side, whereas obstacles and things that get in their way is on the left.
That's really interesting. I didn't even hear about that. I may need to watch the episode again with that in mind.
Yeah, it's really cool once you are aware of it. You start looking for the little details where they do that.
The episode that this kind of reminds me of is the Simpsons episode Sideshow Bob's Last Gleaming, which is the one that takes place at the Air Force Base and he steals a nuclear weapon. And which you do see a lot of the same humor in that, the humor of, well, to use what Reader's Digest would call the humor in uniform. With like you look at these things and you immediately think, okay, these are going to be like kind of boring military guys, but no, they make them all kind of goofy and somewhat incompetent, especially Fry's grandfather, who is like Gomer Pyle.
God, Enos is hilarious, and I love how blatant it is that Enos is, shall we say, a friend of Dorothy.
Yes.
That would be an appropriate term for the time, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel so bad for the guy, though, stuck in the 40s, so deep in the closet he can see Narnia, and eventually killed by a nuke with no chance to truly live. Genuine tragedy.
There's a lot of like really, I did like a lot of the really subtle stuff, and even the fact that Fry is like, no, you have to be a man, you have to have sex with my grandmother.
Speaking of which, so this episode brings up the concept of the grandfather paradox, but it doesn't actually go into the reason why it's a paradox.
It's not well, the paradox is the fact that there was no initial information. It is a closed loop, which like physics and stuff does say that is entirely possible. If you have a causality loop, there's nothing stopping that from happening. It's just like, where does the original information come from? And you see this sort of thing in like Majora's Mask, or it wasn't Majora's. It was Ocarina of Time, where you travel back in time and teach the Song of Storms to the guy that eventually teaches you the Song of Storms in the future.
Yeah, what happens in this episode is less an example of the grandfather paradox and more an example of the bootstrap paradox. Where...
Yeah, this is the bootstrap paradox, whereas the grandfather paradox is sort of mentioned in quite literally the sense that he may end up killing his own grandfather.
Well, except that, again, they don't really go into why the grandfather paradox is a paradox. The thing about the grandfather paradox is, like, say I go back in time and I kill my own grandfather, and now, because my grandfather's dead, I don't exist. I cease to exist.
And you don't exist, and so you would never have been able to go back in time to kill him.
Right, and then I can't kill my grandfather back in time, so he's still alive, so then I'm still alive, which means I go back in time and kill him, and thus the paradox. And that's the grandfather paradox.
Which is often something people point out when dealing with like going back in time to kill Hitler. If you killed Hitler, he would never have done the things that made him so notorious for you to want to go back in time to kill him.
Exactly. Like you can see these sorts of things all over the place in time travel.
Yeah, and the easy way to explain it is just either like parallel timelines or split timeline theory.
Well, it's also like there's the other commonly used plot device of the grandfather paradox just exploding and destroying the universe.
Yes, but that's a very unsatisfying way of handling things, although the show does kind of handle paradoxes in that way as well, as we will find out very, very much later.
I mean, hey, the Umbrella Academy made that work. Anyway. But, like, yeah, no, what we see here is much more the bootstrap paradox, which is where, essentially, the events during the time travel are what cause themselves Which in this case, we have Fry, who in a previous episode, saved the Earth from the brain spawn because he lacks the Delta brainwave. So if that wasn't the case, if he was never able to if he had a Delta brainwave and was not able to save the Earth from the brain spawn in the past, then he never would have been able to travel back in time to Roswell in this episode because they'd all be dead. And the reason that he lacks the Delta brainwave is that here, he's able to travel back in time and become his own grandfather. So Fry is able to go back in time and ensure that he lacks a Delta brainwave only because he lacks a Delta brainwave. The event is its own cause. This is the bootstrap paradox.
And wasn't this all retconned in terms of narrative? Like, they had the whole thing about the brain spawn, and it's just like the fact that he was somehow different, and they didn't really explain exactly what it was that was different about him that made him immune to the brain spawn. I think it's just implied that it's because he's already an idiot.
Well, they said in the original episode that he lacks the Delta brainwave, but they didn't explain why.
Yeah, and I'm guessing it's just they hadn't really figured out exactly why, or maybe they thought they'd maybe figure it out at a later point how to put that into the story. And they figure, well, this is as good a reason as any. And they may not have even thought of that as the reason when they were writing this episode, not even until a much later one.
Yeah, well, because, what I was just talking about is from a later episode when the brain spawn come back, and they clarified the reason he lacks the Delta brainwave is that he's his own grandfather, which, clearly was something they came up with after the fact, but it all ties together quite nicely. But, again, that's...
Yeah, which again is a credit to just the wonderful, clever writing in this show, that they were able to deal with just random information and make it work. Which, can work in many situations. Is a very good writing exercise to just try to associate certain things together that have nothing to do with each other.
Actually, do you want to know, I think, my favorite example of the bootstrap paradox?
What?
So, Time Splitters 3, first-person shooter for, PlayStation 2, GameCube, that whole generation, which one of the few console FPSs I will actually play, where the villain has a time machine, and as an old man, he gives it to his past self so he doesn't have to waste his life on the research.
Mm-hmm.
And then he succeeds in the research, himself as an old man, because his past younger self goes to the future and gives it to him in the first place.
Makes sense. You sort of see that thing in Sliders as well, although it's less bootstrap paradox and more multiverse, where he's working on getting the parallel dimension, his parallel dimension portal working, and then himself from another parallel dimension just kind of shows up. He's like, "Oh, I see what you're doing here. Here's what you're doing wrong here," and then he fixes it for him, and now it works. Which isn't quite bootstrap paradox, but it's similar.
If it works.
Another one I believe is bootstrap paradox is this one episode from My Little Pony, where Twilight goes back in time to visit herself to give a warning.
Right.
But the warning gets cut off. So she goes through this whole week of going crazy, and then finds the spell to go back in time to warn herself, and then the warning gets cut off.
Let me guess, the warning was not to worry about anything?
Basically,
exactly.
Yeah. And she shows up and she's got an eye patch and her hair is all messed up. It's for how far in the future are you from? It's I'm from a week in the future.
Next Tuesday.
Oh my god.
Next Tuesday.
That's another show that I really need to watch at some point.
We could watch it together.
I already kind of did that.
Yeah, you did that whole podcast with Oi with the My Little Pony and Breaking Bad. I remember that.
Yeah. Our patron saint was what's his fucking name?
Yeah, it was a weird juxtaposition that certainly made for an amusing podcast. So I love the gag here of Fry making himself a military uniform using a can of all-purpose spray.
How does that work?
Yeah, that's my question.
Do you whisper to the can what its purpose is? I need you to be a military uniform. Okay.
Yeah, seriously.
All-purpose spray. Be non-stick coating.
Because, if it is truly, literally all-purpose, how does it know what purpose you want to use it for so that you don't end up doing something else? Spray something and it melts like acid and you're like, oh, dang, I wanted butter.
Or better than spray on oxalic acid, and it's like, oh darn, I wanted clothes.
Oh God.
Clothes beam.
I'm reminded of that SNL sketch that had a single spray that was both a breath spray and a debilitating pepper spray.
Oh Lord.
And there's a little switch on it that tells you like which way it is. Like is it refreshing breath spray or is it debilitating pepper spray right now? And the two colors are aqua and seafoam.
Oh dear.
And of course, when you refill it, it switches colors because of the complicated filling mechanism. And it also and there's like this whole thing about like how the different colors will change based on different situations.
I've also you just made me think of a joke from The Good Place where this character invents the world's first deodorant, body wash, soft drink.
Well, that's basically men's shower gel. Because, like, with women, it's always, like, specially formulated for the hair on a woman's left middle toe. And for men, it's, like, combination mouthwash, body wash, hair wash, deodorant, and car degreaser.
Well, I mean, especially with, like, okay, with the personal hygiene stuff, the, like, multi-combining things in one makes all of those functions significantly less effective.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially like shampoo and conditioner, if you combine them both into one thing, they don't do nearly as good a job. And in fact, when I switched from a 2-in-1 to separate shampoo and conditioner, my hair is so much nicer now.
Yeah, I don't use conditioner anymore. I found I don't really need it.
Fair enough. I absolutely do.
Hygiene talk, the kind of thing people tune into us for.
This is just a conversation. These things happen. Okay, so back on topic. I love how Leela and the professor's period-appropriate clothes are just... It just freaking kills me, because I say period-appropriate with just massive scare quotes. It's like, I believe zoot suits like the professor's had already gone out of fashion a few years before 47, and Leela's poodle skirt is actually ahead of its time here.
I like Leela's outfit. I think it's cute.
It is very cute.
Oh yeah, a lot of people love the poodle skirts.
Yeah, poodle skirts are cute.
It's cute, but it's like this wasn't actually in fashion yet in 1947.
Yeah.
Well, neither was the way
50s.
Leela was talking either, so like they're completely out of...
Have you seen that XKCD strip that was like, in 100 years, all slang from the past, like, several decades will sound equally old-timey and interchangeable?
Yeah, basically.
Although when they're in these period-appropriate clothes, that's appliance salesmen that they interact with. Just this guy, casual 40s sexism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A foot wash basin and a fold-out ironing board, which, I mean, I could absolutely see that working. We have an ironing board built into the house, built into the wall.
We don't. We might have at some point, but the one we have isn't.
Well, you know, what's interesting with stoves is the like, drawer that people often use to store, like, pans and stuff in? That was not its original purpose. It was basically meant to be a place for you to put cooked food to keep it warm, because the heat from the oven would get into there and keep it from getting cold. But people realized that, like, this cookware is really resistant to heat anyway, and it was just a perfect place to store it. And so over time, that just became its primary purpose, but that's not why it was originally put there.
Also, I don't really like the idea of storing food down near the floor.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. It's hard to reach.
Nowadays, you just kind of put the oven on as low as it'll go and just kind of leave the food in there just staying warm.
I mean, and nowadays you can also just get a straight-up dedicated warming drawer.
Or just serve it. Or just serve it and microwave it later if it gets cold, you know?
That too.
They didn't have microwaves back then, so...
Well, I also like how, with the nuclear blast that kills Enos, and when we then cut back to Leon the Professor, you can see the nuclear blast from the town just in the background through the window.
Yeah. That's not safe.
That was a surprisingly dark turn, too, for
Yeah.
just, like, he randomly gets killed like that. And not just killed in that way, but killed in a nuclear fucking explosion. It's like, god damn. And it's like, obviously, they handle her grief pretty reasonably. Like they play it for humor, but it's like, if it's any consolation, he was vaporized, which is like, okay, where are you going with this? So he can't come back as a zombie. No, he was vaporized, so he didn't suffer.
But no, like, the fact that you can see the nuclear blast from the town, Eden, as you pointed out, no, it's not safe, but it is very realistic, because before we really knew the danger of nuclear fallout, they did, in fact, do nuclear tests not too far from populated areas. This was generally in the desert, where, they had all the open space, but, like, getting to see a nuclear explosion in the distance was actually, for example, one of the earliest tourist attractions in Las Vegas.
Really?
Yeah, like, people would go to Vegas to gamble, and, they'd see the show, they'd see a nuclear test while they were there. It was just a wild thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny the way they put Bender's body back together like a little spaceship.
Well, yeah, we haven't even talked about this kind of the three subplots in this episode, because we talked so much about the whole grandfather thing. We got Zoidberg being analyzed as an alien, like alien autopsy style, and you got Bender being rebuilt as a UFO. And it's like, all three of these are great.
Yeah. This is one of those episodes where every piece just comes together perfectly. And this really is like peak Futurama.
Oh yeah, this episode was actually nominated for an Emmy.
That I didn't know,
Really?
yeah.
That's nice.
But like what you brought up with like the Area 51 Roswell stuff.
And it won. Yeah. It won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, what you were just talking about with like the alien land crash site subplot there. There's so much good material in that subplot, like the joke about how like no one's to know about this except us, and a single conspiracy nut who no one will believe.
He has a horrible camera.
It really does.
Hey, look, it's Bigfoot. Grab the shittiest camera you can find.
Maybe Bigfoot is just naturally out of focus like that. Who knows?
Thank you, Mitch Hedberg.
Although, I personally like to divide conspiracy theories into three main categories. Category 1, weird but harmless. This is your, alien invasions, your Bigfoots, your, just cryptids in general. All the
Well, certain cryptids. Some of them are racist.
well, like all the weird, stupid shit that's okay, but like it's weird but ultimately harmless. Category 2, things the CIA literally did and are a matter of public record, and they're only considered conspiracy theories because Americans are propagandized to shit and refuse to believe that they happened.
Yeah.
And category number 3, just fucking anti-Semitism. This is just plain old anti-Semitism. And, like the lizard people fall into here. George Soros falls into here. Most of what the right wing believes these days falls into here.
I think you could sort of expand that beyond anti-Semitism into just sort of the batshit Christo-fascist, whatever the term would be. Like even beyond, it hurts more than just.
Christo-fascist is a decent term for it, but ultimately when you actually dig down deep enough into every single one of those, they do all trace back to anti-Semitism in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I really miss when the dominant category of conspiracy theories was 1 and not 3.
Yeah. I would welcome an alien invasion at this point. It's like, yeah, we're gonna destroy your leaders. Like, oh, thank fucking God.
Right? It's like, you will only be entitled to 50% of the value of your work. You will be forced to
work 50%. And you will work for all four most useful hours of your day.
Yeah, right? Also, before we get into...
I'm guessing we both read the same comic.
Yeah, before we get into late-stage capitalism again, I also love the faked moon landing joke.
Yeah.
Because,
yeah.
This was 1947, so they had, 22 years before...
I mean, so I love how the joke is just, but sir, that's where we're building the fake moon landing set, so we'll have to really go to the moon. I love that because someone actually once did the math on how many people it would need to be in on it and keep their mouths shut in order to fake the moon landing and, keep it secret. And it was somewhere in the thousands. And at that...
Where do you put that conspiracy on your scale? Because I don't think it's harmless.
I mean, it's weird, but...
And I don't think it qualifies as anti-Semitism either, though.
This is why I said most conspiracy theories fall into those three categories. There's always outliers. No methodology.
Yeah, but that's perfect. A pretty major outlier to have. I don't know. It's just the idea that they trust the government so much, but they don't trust that they could actually do that sort of thing. It's like, well, what the hell are you talking about?
TZ, no taxonomy is perfect, but
no taxonomy is perfect, but no conspiracy theorist even knows what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, and honestly, once you believe in one conspiracy theory, you probably believe in a whole bunch more, because once you buy into conspiracy thinking, it becomes so much easier to buy into the rest. There's a really good, fantastic video on this by Sophie from Mars, one of my favorite YouTubers, about conspiracy theories, and she primarily talks about conspiracy theories in the left wing, and demonstrating how we are as susceptible to this as the right wing, despite what we tend to assume. But she does get very much into conspiratorial thinking and what the psychology that leads to people believing these things in the first place. And it's a fascinating video that I highly recommend. But with the moon landing, once you need thousands of people to be actively participating and keeping their mouths shut for decades, at that point, it really is just so much easier to believe that it actually happened,
Yeah, and not to mention a lot of the science behind it of what you'd have to do to get the specific types of shadows, the gravity, all that technology you would need to fake it at that time period just didn't exist.
Yeah, the only one that seems plausible to me is that the initial moon landing was fabricated just in order to beat the Russians. Then once that kind of slowed down, we actually were able to get to the moon and place the retroreflectors and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's the only one that seems mildly plausible.
Yeah, I don't think I believe even that. But I do love the old joke that they hired Stanley Kubrick to fake the moon landing.
But he was so method that he required them to actually film on the moon.
Yeah, exactly. Because he was that much of a notorious perfectionist and honestly kind of infamous for torturing his actors in his attempts.
Yeah, he's went on record as saying actors are props that feel pain or something.
Yeah, that's
or something
not great.
Like that. I forget exactly what the quote is, but
yeah, I like his movies, but he was not a good dude. So,
Zoidberg is fun in this episode.
Oh, he really is. The autopsy scene is an all-timer.
He's just happy to be taking part in it.
Yeah,
I need that to speak.
Saws faster.
Start sawing faster.
Saws harder.
The important thing is that he's meeting new people, and he got a free meal out of it.
He had fun.
Yeah, he was having the time of his life. So, how do we feel about Fry sleeping with his own grandmother?
I mean, he wasn't his
he wasn't his grandfather yet.
His grandmother yet.
Fair. It's just it's a bit
and
weird.
It's they were approximately of the same age, so there's nothing weird there.
It's still incest.
Wait a minute, I just had a thought. Didn't they? Okay.
What?
In the episode with the Slurm Factory, didn't they have that joke about Fry becoming infertile when Bender zaps his crotch with the F-ray?
Yeah.
I get that.
That could have just been his current sperm.
Okay, that was just a quick gag way back in season 1, so I assume most viewers wouldn't even think about this. But I just had that realization. I'm sorry. I need to look into something because I vaguely remember hearing something about this, but Okay, yeah, so
That's when
they...
he goes, ow, my sperm. It's like, ow, it didn't hurt that time. Which, like, yeah, they're all dead. They can't feel pain anymore. Which, I mean, that was so long ago, I would imagine he could produce more since then.
Okay, my memory was correct. They actually address this in the episode commentary. They bring this up, and they suggest that maybe the parasite worms fixed it.
That is also highly plausible.
It is!
Oh, that's great. So, see, it all works out.
It's very funny to me, though, how, like, this is a tiny little thing that no one would notice, but the writers, at least someone on staff, realized this by the time they were recording the commentary and came up with a potential answer for it. Although, no, what I originally wanted to say before we got sidetracked by that, so Fry's whole plot here, this is just a direct copy of the premise of the 80s movie Time Rider, which had a motorcycle racer going back in time to the Old West and becoming his own great-great-grandfather, which kind of a weird thing to reference since the movie wasn't very good.
The only reference I've heard to Time Rider is on South Park, where they compare the different time travel stuff as opposed to Time Rider rules, which are just plain silly.
Again, it wasn't a very good movie.
No.
Why did he go to the Old West in the first place?
The only Western sci-fi movie I liked was Cowboys and Aliens.
I mean, that one was kind of fun. You know, it was dumb, but that's, you know, being fun, sometimes that's all you need.
Dumb fun is good.
Yeah, it's not always what I want, but...
Sometimes it's what you need. Actually, how did Bender's head not rust after all those years?
He's
Not
like
decompose
90%
in any
dolomite.
way.
He was buried in the desert, and the desert is defined by having low rainfall.
Well, rain is not the only thing that causes water. It's oxygen specifically that causes rust. But he could be made of like this futuristic metal that doesn't really rust, because they do this in later episodes as well, where he just waits for thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of an old time travel trope to have the immortal character take the long way around.
Which that would be so goddamn lonely. That'd be
Yeah.
so fucking boring. He didn't seem
But
to
it's
mind.
Bender.
I mean, he got to just take a nice 1,000-year nap. I don't think many people would complain about that.
I want a 1,000-year nap.
Mood.
I'd still be tired, though.
That's depression for you.
You gotta go
Yes.
play some 9-pin bowling with some fairies in the forest.
Well, if you'll excuse me, I've got a hot date with my own grandmother.
Thank you for listening to Space Podcast 3000. Your three voices of the future are Nova Altman, Doug Hancox, and Eden Ballard. The theme music is Voxel Revolution by Kevin MacLeod. You can support the show and listen to new episodes a full week early at patreon.com/spacepod3k. Follow us on Twitter at spacepod3k. Be sure to join us next time as the Planet Express crew contemplate the nature of God in Godfellas.